Okay, we've got a lovely evening tonight. We've got Jennifer Offord, who is just been promoted to head of Meridian Water Regeneration in Enfield, who has had awards as a town planner in the past, particularly to do with the Olympics. And she's going to be talking about design minds. So it's pack-filled this evening. We are going to have a breakout room one-third of the way through Jennifer's talk. And there is going to be very interactive, and we're going to have discussion. Andrew Veazey is kindly supporting Jennifer, and he will be facilitating one of those breakout rooms, and Jennifer will be facilitating the other one. So there'll be two breakout rooms for about 6 minutes, okay? After that, we'll have discussion. Following that, we have got an announcement from our advocates about a fun day on the 29th of October, I believe. And then advocates will stay with me because they want to talk about training sessions. So people will go and advocates will stay with me to talk about training sessions and dates for those training sessions. I hope that's okay with everybody. Right. Let's hand over to Jennifer, and I'm going to really enjoy this because I love anything to do with design minds and neurodiversity.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Hope everybody can hear me. I will just get my PowerPoint set up. Just bear with me a few minutes, and I'll make this a bigger screen. Here we go. Slideshow. Right, I have about 16 slides for everybody. I will try and get rid of this annoying bar, which is something to do with my inclusion software, maybe. Good, it's gone. So the first part of this presentation is some work that I've done on thinking about inclusive design, and then the second part is just how we can encourage conversations. So I just start with these images, and I'm talking about going beyond individual support. So I think individual support for neurodiversity is really important, but to me it can feel like trying to squeeze yourself into a hole that doesn't fit, and it can be a misunderstanding if the majority of people see things a different way. If you're trying to get support on your own, it can be really exhausting. So I'm looking here at other things which we can do on top of individual support. So when we look at it like this, it's just showing here how design can have an influence. So the environment, sorry, some of my images are a little bit fuzzy, but it's just showing how it's the design of the place that can change people's experience. And you can take an individual approach, like the second image, where you're giving different support to different people. But if as a design team, you give it thought, and try and involve as many voices in the design as possible, then hopefully you can get a solution that works, if not for everybody, it works widely instead of just for a majority. And so this is another example about how designing for neurodiversity, one size doesn't fit all. So in the top image, if you're getting everyone to use the same thing, you could end up with a solution that's just uncomfortable for everybody, because there really isn't just an average type person. So thinking about designing environments, it is offering different alternatives and thinking about different needs. But sometimes that can involve a design that's adaptable, and maybe it could grow with you as you have different needs. So just talking about neurodiversity, I know us as a group use this word a lot, but for some people it's not something that's often talked about. And so this is just the way that I try and explain it. I begin by saying that everyone's brain is different, and that this is natural. It's really important to realize that. and that we need to design both for information and also sensory processing differences, and we can touch on that a bit later. But hypo and hypersensitivity, so a sort of high sensitivity and low sensitivity, are both really important, and that this is changeable. So it's not a fixed thing, it depends on the environment that you are in as well. So these are some of the factors that when you're designing a space, it's really important to think that you're not designing for one type of person. I will move through these next 3 slides, and then we'll open up to the discussion. So the first thing about designing inclusive environments is this thinking about information and sensory processing differences. And I'm putting up this image of the BBC office in Cardiff to show how it is possible for massive design teams or big projects to be thinking about neurodiversity. And their approach there was to have zones, so different feelings for different spaces. And if our buildings are more inclusive, then I really feel that that reduces pressure on individuals. But the second thing that I think we need to think about, and this is quite a busy slide, but it's talking about communication, and that's written communication and spoken communication, and thinking that this communication is designed, whoever puts it together has composed it, and what users have they thought about? Have they just thought about their own perspective, or have they thought about reaching an audience, a wide audience? And something that I think is really important is thinking about numbers and dyscalculia, because I think in a lot of situations there's just an expectation that people are really familiar with using numbers under pressure, having their memory for codes and passwords, and that can be a real barrier in communication. And this is a poster that has been put together by the government. I think it might be HMRC, and it's about thinking every time you send out communications, if it's about tax, for example, thinking about dyscalculia. So there are really good conversations happening about communication. But the third strand, beyond individual support, that I'd like to talk about is culture and governance. So you can think about the spaces and you can think about the communication style, but these things only come about if the way that you work has inclusion at the heart of it. And I'm sure I've shown this slide in previous presentations, but it's if the way that you're setting up your projects is in a sort of uncomfortable way, then it's the same as this image, this classic image that says, would you ask a fish to climb a tree? So you could do everything to try and support that fish, but if you're setting a challenge that doesn't suit them, then you're not going to get anywhere. So I thought I would just set out those 3 strands to make the point that while individual support is really vital, there is a lot more that can be done in terms of the environments that we work in, the communication, and the way that we run projects. But it has to be with a mind that's thinking about designing these things. It won't just happen if the design team just designs to their own experience of the world. So I wanted to pause here. And Catherine, this is the point that I was going to bring in the breakout room and with Andrew as well. But what this slide is showing is that there's loads of guidance out there. So there's lots of documents and posters and things that whole teams of people have put together to try and get the environment more inclusive, the communication and the projects better. But I wanted to sort of pass it on to the group, and I'll stop sharing for a minute to just sort of say, what types of initiatives have people in the group seen? So to encourage, it might be the environment or the communication, or even this culture piece. So Catherine, are you able to set up some rooms for us, please? I think you're on mute, Catherine.
We've got one group, it'll be 7, and one group, it'll be 6, I think. Okay, so I'm just going to sort that out.
And this is about going beyond maybe just PowerPoint presentations like this, and it's just thinking, what can we do to have more impact and grow the conversations?
Yeah, one group is 6, and that's with Andrew, and one group is 7, and that's with Jennifer. Okay, so that's Adrian, Andre, Dee, Kenya, Linda, and Alicia in one group, and with Andrew it's Maddie, Sadia, Simon, Ursula, and Wong. So I'm going to open the rooms. You're going to be there for 6 minutes. You can come out of the room if you want. I'll be here waiting. Okay, so don't worry, you won't be on your own. And then about 1 minute before the room closes, you'll get an announcement that you'll be coming back. Okay, is everybody clear? Is everybody clear about what they're discussing?
And we'll be in the rooms to facilitate as well, so we can do it when we get there too. Hopefully you're okay with that, Andrew.
Okay, it's happening now.
Thank you.
Hi there. Andrew, your group seemed to diminish. I think you lost about 2 people. I was watching them go.
Yeah, one of them, Simon couldn't get, he's come back, but he couldn't get a seat somewhere. And then yeah, Sadia came in, Ursula, and then they just disappeared. I don't know what. I mean, I know Zoom, if it's raining, like it's come up on my computer there, it's heavy rain here. And if it gets rainy, I know in some areas, because I'm on my own, if you've got more than one computer on Zoom, that it can cause problems, but it's fine at the moment for me, but I don't know.
Okay, everybody's come back. So I think they have. Yes, I think they have. So I'll hand over to Jennifer initially, and then obviously Andrew to feedback on the groups.
Thank you, Catherine. We had a really good discussion. We were discussing how there's the dyscalculia poster that I showed, but that if you don't go through the sort of feel the emotions that it can feel like to be in that scenario when you're under pressure, then maybe just seeing a poster isn't going to resonate. So it's really just having the experience. We talked about how some training, sometimes you could experience a wheelchair or moving through a space in a way that you're not used to, but that sometimes people might raise questions about the way that that's done, and is it done in a balanced way? And we also talked about, Adrian talked about how for some mental health training, you get to hear voices with devices that mean that you get to hear lots of different voices, and that can really stick with you because you've then been through an experience. Is that right?
It's more literally in each get one person in each ear for the hearing voices exercise, and they've got to instructed to shout every so often say different things with different voices.
So it's like people in a. Sorry, I didn't understand.
Because it's
everything's
because
virtual.
You have first aid training, but you also have separate to that mental health first aid training.
I see.
Yeah, which is a fairly standard course, has been for years.
I've done, but I've only done it online. So I think that is another thing of this, how in person can be quite a big benefit. I'm certainly finding this, doing it through a screen is a bit of a challenge. And I'm just trying to think, there was another good example at the end as well of maybe doing a play. So that could be a really good way of getting into the experience. But Andrew, I'll pass over to the ideas that were discussed in your group as well.
Yeah, so we were talking generally, and I was really pleased. Sadia mentioned to us about, she went to an event and where they had captions on, and that was promoting inclusion. And obviously there is an app called caption.ed, which DSA students, and you can get through Access to Work. So for autistic participants, for hearing impaired participants, some people with ADHD may find it helpful as well, because I've met some students recently who have both autism and ADHD, and dyslexia and ADHD. We were talking about the use of color. So, for example, when you've got posters up, like when I used to work in person, we used to have posters up in a cream color to kind of make it more disability friendly, having the use of language. Yeah, I mean, we were just mainly really focusing on how people kind of connect with kind of language and images. And Sadia and I had a brief chat about how the posters I put up when I used to work at BPP did the desired effect, because there was no one coming forward, and having the posters around the corridor with the specific font and the cream background, people were rushed. I was rushed off my feet to kind of get people to come and make a physical appointment. But you are right, doing things online all the time can create barriers for some neurodivergent people. I've come across that as a trainer recently, and I'm going to think about some strategies to kind of overcome that for the future.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm halfway through these slides, everybody, and I think it is draining. So I'll go through the next few slides, and then at the end let's have a discussion. But I think what I'm also trying to say is I think our dyslexic minds, I've seen it in this group in other sessions, I think there's a real ability to come up with ideas and new ways of doing things, and certainly being in this group growing confidence of kind of suggesting new things rather than just doing things in the same old way. So give me a few seconds to work through this slide sharing business. Hopefully we're here. Here we go. So yeah, this was where I'll do this so that you don't have to look at my face. So this is where there are all these guides and initiatives. These are the posters in the bottom corner, handbooks and design standards that are out there. But I think what I was wondering is, if all this stuff is out there, then why isn't it that when we're in work or walking through spaces, why don't we feel like they've been designed for us? I think sometimes you do, and it is much more relaxing in that environment, but often it's that image I had at the beginning of feeling like you're trying to fit in the wrong shaped hole all day. So the next slides, they are busy and they do have a pale background because I had someone else helping and I was unable to get rid of the bright background. So I do apologize for people. Do make it small on your screen and I'll talk it through if it's a bit too bright and dazzling. But what this slide does, and don't worry about reading all the words, but it's just talking about how over time the ways that we have communicated has really changed. And so there might be artworks, cave artworks, and there might be early musical instruments thousands of years ago, and games. This is 6,000 more years ago. And then you've got languages that started cropping up. And this isn't precise, but it's just taking us through how in the 15th, 16th century was the time that they call the Renaissance, when there was innovation across art and science and music and design. And I'm sure there were some dyslexic people involved in that conversation. But then in the 20th century is when television has really come forward, and then the 21st century with the digital technologies that we've got, and then COVID and what we're doing now, we probably wouldn't have been comfortable doing before lockdown, where we're all using computers to connect. And I know we've had people from kind of across the world in our group. So this is just trying to put in context that the way that we communicate with other people today has really changed from the past. And there is room to be imaginative, especially in this post-COVID time. And so technology has enabled things like gaming and meeting online and streaming. And so the next bit of my presentation is talking about gaming, and it is a bit blurry, but what it is saying is that I don't know how accurate this is, but it says that scientists might say it takes 400 repetitions to create a sort of remembered pattern in the brain. But if it's done in play, it would take 20 repetitions. And I'm sure it's different for different examples, but it's just how things can stick. And I think games can be divisive. I think different, there's lots of different preferences, and we could be talking about online games or we could be talking about physical games. But in thinking about how we can change the conversation about neurodiversity in a way that it resonates with people, I'm really getting interested in looking at different types of games and co-design. And so I'm a town planner in my day job, and that involves spaces. And so with the design of spaces, there's an increasing move to have games. And these are just some reasons why. So through games, you can exchange knowledge, you can present big amounts of data in a simple way. You can imagine different scenarios, so things that aren't real, you can still visualize them when they're in a game in a way that makes sense to your own brain. You can run trends and patterns. You can understand different stakeholder perspectives. You can have team games, so you can get people to partner up and test a partnership. You can also run conflict or synergy where people are coming together. So you can have scenarios that are artificial, but they can test people. And for town planning, it can enhance spatial perception and get systemic thinking. But I think that also applies to this idea of neurodiversity, and if it's working in city making to get more people involved in the conversation, then it could be something that we think about for neurodiversity. Is there a game that we could come up with together? And so this is where this isn't really a flow chart, it's just a set of different things. Sorry, I'm just trying to hide this, where gaming to engage with people, to get them really connected, much more so than me talking at you with these slides in the background. So when you're designing games, there's lots of things to think about, and it's really important in the center of got inclusion and accessibility. So any game is going to have rules, and that means you've got to explain how the game works. So it can help to have a games master or a lead. It can help to have something that's physical, material, and something to give away. When we've been talking about games in different groups, that has really stuck with people, is not only the memory of playing the game, but if they can take something away from the game. Games can be used to tell stories, to make decisions and share information, and to see how groups work together. So these are just to say games, it's really complex, but it is quite an interesting area, I think, that we could look at for neurodiversity. And so hopefully one day, if we were to meet up in person, or if I get advanced enough to make it through a digital version, I've been working with a group of other planners, and we've been asking ourselves, how could we get the design team for places to care about neurodiversity and inclusion? And we've started coming up with a game which is like a day in the life. So I know you can't see the words, but it's like a journey through the day. You wake up in the morning, you've got to travel to work, you arrive at your office, or your place of work, it could be anywhere. You might have to have an interaction with somebody, you might have to travel somewhere, and then it's what it feels like when you come home in the evening and how tired you are. So I'm not going to explain the detail of this game today, but it's just to give you an example that that I think there are different ways that we could bring the neurodiversity experience into a group game setting. And I will take questions and discussion, two-way discussion at the end. But what we're also trying to do with this game is to find a way of bringing the idea of neurodiversity energy levels. Some people call it spoon theory. I'm sure some of you might have heard of it, but it's the idea that in one day you might only have a certain amount of energy, or what they call a certain amount of spoons, and they get used up as you face different challenges through the day. And so we're trying to weave this in so that people can understand, working through the day when they're given different scenarios, how it can sometimes really zap you to do some things like traveling, but some other things can give you energy. And maybe something we could discuss is how for some days it can really give you energy to be in a group of people, but other days that's the most tiring thing that could happen, and you might have to only do it for a little while and then go home and recover. So we're trying to come up with a way of collecting experiences associated with neurodiversity and then bring them out as a discussion in a game situation. So I'll just move to this as well. So this is sort of where we've got to, that you could, while people are moving through the journey, you could have cards that are giving you different types of characteristics associated with neurodiversity, and so you've got your little persona, your passport, or what we've called the manual of me, where you're taking that person through the journey along with another group, but you could also play it on your own. So this might be a little confusing to deliver through slides, but it's just really to let you know that as a group, this is something that we're thinking about as a new way of talking about neurodiversity. And this is the Neurodiversity and Planning group. But I'll go back to Catherine now, and I'll stop sharing. And then I would just really welcome a sort of group discussion. And it's not really about the mechanics of this game we're creating, because it's very much just an initial idea, but just it's whether it's something that sounds interesting to people. And I can't see the chat, so I'll just have a look now. Yeah, I don't know if that's given any thought. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for a really interesting talk and lot to think about. And spoon theory sounds amazing.
Could probably do a whole talk on spoon theory. Yes.
Maybe we will start the discussion off about energy and about what happens to people during the day in terms of their energy, and because you're interested in that in terms of your planning. So shall we kick off with that? You know, how do people feel about their energy in terms of the day and in terms of being within a group as well? Linda?
It felt very true. It felt, I don't know if anybody else experienced it as well, but a lot of recognition, internal recognition. And I actually thought the game was absolutely fascinating. I think it would be a very useful tool for individuals, particularly somebody who's perhaps managing someone who is on the neurodiverse, but also for that neurodiverse person themselves to start exploring how they can conserve their own energy levels and start creating a world that maybe meets their needs. And I found myself being enchanted and really engaged with this idea of a game and thinking about numerous uses for it. I think it could be really exciting.
Thank you, Linda. And we're just trying to keep it quite simple as well. So trying to find a way of capturing this experience that we probably all have, I think, on a daily basis, but in a way that will be really understandable. And where we are at the moment, we think you probably need a game lead who's got to be someone that's had that lived experience that can kind of communicate it.
Okay, Ursula, you made a point in here about in the chat about how many spoons do you hold?
Yes.
Yeah,
so that's quite an interesting.
I don't know why people have latched onto the spoon theory to me. Oh, if I have so many spoons, I can use 1 spoon for this and 2 spoons of that to explain energy. And it doesn't explain it. I find it so confusing, because why does a spoon equal energy? And why are you holding a handful of spoons? If you start the day with a handful of spoons, where do they come from? I just find it so hard and so abstract. And it's just like, it's so hard to explain somebody else's disability, and then you bring something so abstractly complex like that, and I'm thinking, but I only need 1 spoon to eat my dinner, so why do you have a handful of spoons at the start of the day? I find it quite hard to get past that,
we're trying to talk about it like energy. So instead of trying to use jargon and stuff like that, it's kind of finding the way of the scale.
But it's an example of, I know I've heard this mentioned before, and it's an example of somebody's complicated something that didn't need to be. We have a good example with batteries. You recharge your batteries overnight by going to sleep and these kinds of things. So
I think that's good feedback. That's helpful. I think it's that it's I don't know how to say it. I think the idea was to try and root it in concepts that people using in coaching and stuff, but then try and find this other way of talking about it, which is like, how do you feel when you go through the day? You have you got do you need to have a rest, I suppose, is the way we're trying to say it. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
It's interesting that you're designing a game specifically about neurodivergence and designing cities, because there's a lot of these kind of, as you mentioned, these kind of city-based games that are kind of on the market. So I guess they take, might model, I don't know, traffic or, how
Yeah,
to get to places and whatever.
SimCity, stuff like this. Yeah.
But then this aspect, the sensory aspect and things like that hasn't been taken into account. So it's interesting that your group had taken that on board.
Leisha, thank you, Ursula. That's helpful. Yeah.
I think
Get me
it was
thinking.
Linda was first.
Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say that I'd actually not heard of the concept of spoons and hadn't really realised what it was about. So thanks very much for informing me. But I very much agree. I think it's a complex way of approaching this, and I think this a battery. I often say, and I think I've heard lots of us say, my batteries are flat. I can't get going. Let's use simple language. Let's keep it really straightforward.
That on board. Yeah, I like that. I hadn't even thought about it as that simple.
I didn't know what
are flat.
Spoons meant. Now I've heard it. I think that's daft. It's batteries, and it's, and even you can talk about your internal motor, whatever is comfortable for that person that you're talking to. You don't need to impose jargon.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's good points. Leisha, then Becky, then Dee.
Hi, I'm coming from the perspective of having fibromyalgia, and it's to do with energy and how it robs you of energy from just doing daily tasks for yourself. And to do anything outside of that, it can become very precious because you don't know if you can manage it. However, like the bit that I can understand everybody can imagine is that when you're starting something new, or you're starting a new job, you are tired anyway because you're taking in a lot of information, and there's a point where that diminishes and you kind of can do the task that's on you. So I think if that's taken into consideration, because we're not at the same level as everyone else.
And it changes. That's the idea that it's not like a constant thing, I think, is really important. So something you might be able to do in the morning one day, might not be able to do in the afternoon another day, I think.
Yes, and it's definitely, it doesn't matter how bad you feel sometimes, it's the company you're around as well, the environment that you're in. And that is to do with if it's cold, because your body temperature can just go. You can feel the cold so quickly, even though you're in a room that's warm, you can become sensitive to light, and it creeps up on you, all these things. So I think communication is really, really paramount. And what can I say? And I've done a lot of training as well. I've done I've done autogenics training. And basically that is to calm your body down when you're in a situation. So it makes it gives you back a homeostasis, but it does take time, and people have to understand that as well. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because you do have to bring your body back into a neutral position. And sometimes it can be hard if someone's saying, "Oh, what's wrong? What's wrong?" That kind of thing. If they know that the person can handle it, it's it all depends. It depends on the level of understanding they know of their condition, where they are in it, how much help they've had. I've done a lot of things where I've improved on myself, so it hasn't got that big impact on anyone else, just myself really. And so in the autogenic training there was this I forgot what it's called, but it's something, it's the curve. I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, it's a neurological thing that happens when you're having a neurological sensation from the energy. So sometimes you might feel that the ground is pulled from you. You're gonna faint, or you can feel like just just wobbly. You feel like you're gonna just drop, and that creeps up on you. But at the same time, you still have to have activity. You still have to have a good nutrition intake. So I think the environment, if the environment had something where you could nourish your body, I think that would really help. Yeah, that's all I can think about at the moment. There's more to it, but that's all I can think about at the moment.
Thank you, Leisha. I think, did I say Becky, then Dee, then Adrian? That's the way it comes up on my screen.
No, that was right. You were right. That was the right order. So, hi everybody. Apologies for being so late. Oh, I missed the beginning, but I caught the end, and which was about the game. Which I wanted to ask you a question, because I know you work for, obviously, a planning company. I was at Highways UK over the last 2 days at an event, and there's a big organisation. It's a big consultancy organisation called Jacobs, which you may or may not recognise the name.
I'm working with Jacobs on this game.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, just
Yeah.
because the guy was telling me when I needed some names from him, and then I realised I couldn't spell everybody's surname, and I wanted to email them. So I just said, I'm dyslexic, would you mind? And he wrote them down, and then we ended up going on a complete tangent on, like, it turns out his daughter's dyslexic, and then Jacobs, they have actually got a neurodiversion team, and they're looking at ways to improve on what they can do. And I said about our group and about the journal and some other bits, and he's like, could you? And I showed him, I actually put my phone up, Andrew, and showed him the flyer. He's like, could you send me that? I'm like, yeah, that's not a problem, and everything. I said I'd share him the journal, but I just thought if you weren't talking with the other large organisations, it would be worth reaching out, but you're already there. So
No, it's a real coincidence. So I should have said we're doing it as like town planners, so it's not a company, but it actually is a coincidence that it is this big engineering company. And this is about, the reason they're interested, I think, is because it's trying to get that whole design team at the start of a project to do something fun that's not just a teaching lesson, to try and get them thinking and unlock conversations. So yeah, thank you, Becky, a real coincidence.
Yeah, perfect. I'll leave you be. Thank you.
Okay, can I just be clear with people, because we've got people in the chat as well, and need to be fair.
Thank you, Catherine.
We've got Dee next. We've got Andre, Andrew, Simon, Adrian, then Ursula.
Okay.
So it's Dee next.
I'll make it short. Excuse me. I missed. Is it a card game, or is it an app, or is it going to be an app?
So I want it to be a physical board and card game, but we think to make it simple, it might be possible to scrap the board and just have it as cards. And then this team actually at Jacobs have the ability to turn it into an electronic version, which we've kind of tested, but I'm finding it with you guys today, it's so much harder if you can just get around a table, and if you can physically get to the same place, it's really nice to have something physical to play. But we've done the digital as well, so that it can reach more widely. Yeah, thank you, Dee. So we're trying to be flexible, but every game we realize sets barriers, and it because of this idea of the rules, and it can get in the jargon, like we've said, it can get too complicated. So it's never going to be perfect, but we're almost testing it like a work in progress that people could refine and change over time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Andre, you've got a question in the chat.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Jennifer, have you seen a change in how, like, neurotypical people on planning teams are kind of changing, being more inclusive with their neurodivergent design?
I think it depends. So I think it's less, I find less that distinction and more a distinction of people that really conscious of this brain's different thing. So once people are there, then it can be really engaging. It can be for all kinds of reasons. And then, yes, and it can be through the communication. They start laying out documents better ways and that kind of thing, a bit more mindful. But there are some people I'm very certain that I'm just annoying them and they're not interested. And so I think it's just finding a way that would resonate. And that's really how we got onto the game, that it was just, otherwise you'd do training and it would just be a small group that had heard it before and lost on others. So I quite like the idea earlier from drama as well. That might be another way to kind of capture people. Was it? I hope that answered the question.
Okay, we're going to take Simon next because I think Andrew and Adrian are together. Simon, do you want to make your point from the chat?
Sure. Yeah, just more of a comment rather than a question. But Jennifer, I would be really interested to see how the game develops. As you know, I work at the V&A, and I'm always looking out for examples of the meeting of neurodiversity and design, to be able to sort of highlight this at the museum, so that because I think there's still it's still considering the work in an international museum of art and design. I think there's still a lot of ignorance around neurodiversity and the link with creativity, which is something that I'm really fascinated by. So I did think when I was watching your slides, I was thinking of a sort of actually something that was digital rather than physical. Now I'd be interested to hear how it develops.
Thank you. Yeah, we've definitely got to do lots more testing, but I might even bring it back to this group when it's a bit more thought through. Thank you though, Simon. And it is about, I reckon there's imagination just in this group to come up with stuff like this. There's a whole host of games I reckon we could do.
Okay, I think we've got Andrew and Adrian here because there's a conversation in the chat between them. Andrew's saying there could be a conflict between dyslexic and autistic people, and Adrian is saying, well, actually 50% of autistic people are also dyslexic. So I agree with that. There is overlapping going on here. So Andrew, do you want to come in, and then Adrian?
Yeah, what I'm just thinking is just the way I was looking at it in terms of the spoons theory. Some of my autistic friends who've been going to Dr. Chloe Farah's group online for the last 3 years, if you were to change that name and the way the wording of spoons is seen and how it's integral part of an autistic identity. And I agree, it's been known even from, when I was with Mary Colley with her group about there is the overlap, but I'm just seeing how someone who may be diagnosed with just autism or just dyslexia may see things differently. I'm not disagreeing with what Adrian's saying, but because of my experience, and there can be also inadvertently times when the autistic brain may be in conflict with the dyslexic brain. And there are some things that, I live with where my brain can be kind of disagreeing with things. So I just wanted to point out in that, I understand what Ursula's saying, how she may see spoons, but those of us who've been going religiously to Dr. Chloe Farah's group for, nearly 3 years, we hear that spoons. It's written in about 4 of the books on my 40 books on my bookshelves over there to do with autism and kind of approaches to studying and various other things. So I can see how it would work, but I'm just saying if you've met, if you've got one person, there may be a conflict. I'm just kind of, just being a bit me, like at team meetings, I always point things out that are a bit different in terms
it's really welcome, Andrew. And I guess what I'll say to that is what as a group we've felt really important, and it's why your comments on spoon are really good, and moving to that the battery is full. I think what we're trying to do is take all those words like neurotypical and different diagnoses out and try and have a conversation about energy levels and the day that
Yeah, of
can
course.
bring acting in, but it's underpinned by this experience, so it's kind
Exactly.
of it's there,
I
but,
agree with
but
what you're
we should
saying.
strip out the word. So Ursula, you've kind of helped on that one, so it doesn't contradict it, but it's just trying to make it more open. And Adrian, I think over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I made an earlier point, which was that when we had the London Autistic Rights Movement, we found out that of our executive of 7 people, 5 of them had some kind of early injury now, or one was premature, some birth injuries, some brain injuries shortly after birth or in early childhood. And there was one person who was kind of vehemently opposed to kind of including that within it. He then found out when he was over 60 years old and communicated to me many years later that he'd had a brain injury as well. So that really can't be ignored given those kind of statistics. And now these parent-led organizations do want to ignore that because statistically speaking, over 2/3 of the time, if a brain injury is under the age of 2, one or both of the parents or carers have some measure of responsibility for it. So there's whole things around denial there as well, and I put something about that and the whole thing about denial, which and recovery from injury, and the mourning thing, which comes originally from breast cancer, actually, but which is an important part of what's going on, and tends to get thoroughly ignored. And then also when it comes to these clashes between people who identify as autistic and who identify as dyspraxic and dyslexic, well, yes, that's a very real thing. And in fact, what effectively destroyed DANDA as a campaigning organization, although it still does technically still exist even now, although it's not really run properly, I would say, was a clash between basically an executive which was determined to just push things and try and dissolve it and push it entirely in the way of dyspraxia and autistic.
Hi there, Adrian. Can we kind of keep to the point, because we're talking about design minds here?
Well, yeah, but the clash, it very much is the point, actually, because these clashes are very real. Okay, you can't ignore them, and they tend to be ignored. And as
can I say, just state to that, really aware of that, and I think that is something that no game is going to avoid, is it? I think there will be conflict and things will come out of it, but I guess it's trying to stimulate that conversation, but in a way that everyone involved gets something from playing the game.
Well, yeah. I mean, but we've got to be aware of these things.
Yeah, there will be conflict. Yeah.
And solutions. I put in the chat what a charity called the Silver Lining Charity, which I'm a member of, and does lots and lots of online groups. Brilliant charity, which is set up by a dyslexic neuropsychologist called Sherry Brer.
I'm going to get chucked out my building, so I'm just going to switch my camera off. But Catherine, just over to you.
Can we then move on to Ursula? I'm really sorry, Adrian, but we're coming to the end here. Ursula, can you now say what you had to say in the chat, because Jennifer is now leaving. So
no, just a quick or more of a comment. I wonder if the bit about energy levels links to the concept of 15-minute cities, because that's becoming talked about a fair bit at the minute. And obviously, if people have got most of the things they need within 15 minutes, it's going to help your energy levels. and it's going to help your familiarity as well. So
I'll say
they
thank
might
you
link
for that
together.
comment, Ursula, because it is something I think that we're trying to do as planners, is make things more convenient, as you say. I won't say more because it's strangely controversial, but it does, yeah, seem something that's important.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jennifer. We can see you're fleeing the building. So thank you very much for doing that talk. I want to remind everybody that the next talk is on the 29th of November at the WFA AGM, and Maddie and Kenya will be talking about the Advocate programme. So that's 7 o'clock, Wednesday, the 29th of November. Dee, did you want to do a very quick, or Andre, a very quick message about the fun day on the 29th of October?
Andre, did you want to say?
Okay. I want to say, everyone, Dee's doing a fun walk, obviously, on the 29th of October. We've sent out a few texts and emails. I'm supporting Dee with this event because I feel like it's something really worthwhile for all of us. How many of us actually get to do events that are, fun and to do with neurodivergency? So the walk will be in Willesden, as I said, on the 29th, Sunday, the 29th of October, from 1 to 4 p.m. We need to raise additional funds to host an interactive online art and music event, as well as the event that will be held, the Fun Day event that will be held in March 24. We would love to see any of you, if you can come, or if you're interested even in sponsoring us, one or the other. We would be, this would just, I think it would advertise it to everyone. The other thing I missed out, sorry, I'm kind of doing this quickly because I know we're trying to get off the call. If you know any other neurodivergent groups that you could send it on to, just to promote it for Dee. Like, she's really working hard. She's one of our tribe. And I'd love to see people just, give her a little bit of a boost. She's put a lot of time and energy into this. You don't know how much time and energy. So any way you can support us, either by turning up or sponsoring either one of us, we'd really, really, really appreciate it, guys.